In 5 minutes, you will know how I painted the Red Gobbo, and I will tell you why the good little buddy is not on his base, and what exactly will happen to him.
Hello there, and a warm welcome to another tea tutorial, the video series in which you will find your inner self of miniature painting. And while the tea leaves are dispersing their pleasant aromas in a cup of hot water, and the sand of time is trickling down grain by grain, I am spreading colors on the miniature. In minutes.
I'm starting with a base coat for the skin. For this, I am using Citadel Auric Flesh. I'm painting around 2 to 4 layers, nicely thinned and not too quick. I always wait until the color is dry. The coats are going to be red. For that, I am using a base coat of multiple thin layers of Citadel Corn Red. The inner side of the coat and all the white parts, like snow, are getting a few thin coats of Citadel Grey Sear. Now I am getting on with the leather. I paint the leather belt and shoes with Vallejo German Chocolate Black Brown. As you probably already guessed, multiple thin coats. You can just put all the colors on the wet palette and switch between all the base coats. That way you can wait until the paint is dry before painting over the same part again. While I painted the chocolate brown, I realized that the color was quite brown and not as dark as I had anticipated. As I was opting for a darker brown, instead I could have used Rhinox hide as it covers a little better. The Christmas tree balls and stars and in general everything that is supposed to be shiny later is getting multiple layers of Vallejo silver. But don't panic, the silver looks really bad after just 1 or 2 layers. Just keep adding more thin layers and you will see it shine. Now I can start with the shading. For the skin, coat and head I am using Citadel Drucci Violet. This shade creates a good contrast with the green and enough depth in the red. For the red parts I am trying to apply it quite thin and controlled. I pull the color into the recesses and darker parts for the miniature. I am keeping the pants in a neutral dark grey. For that I am starting with a base coat of Mechanicus Standard Grey. All the white parts are getting a good slab with Citadel Apothecary White. I usually rant about this color, but maybe I will change my mind. Maybe not, I have to figure something out. More on this later. As long as the white is drying, I can start with the gun. The metal part is getting a base coat of lead belcher. The coat and head got quite dark after applying the shade. To get the punch of the red back, I start to brighten the bigger parts and edges with really thin coats of corn red. This already adds some red punchiness. While I repeat the painting of the thin corn red, I pay attention to avoiding recesses and parts that are in the shadows. I glaze, meaning I'm applying a really thin layer of corn red to recessed parts. To achieve glazing consistency, I spread the red on my wet palette and thin it down a notch with water. I then got some color on my brush and go over my thumb. If my skin shines through and it is really just a shimmer, I continue to paint the miniature. Otherwise, I either thin the paint more or put more paint down. After the corn red has dried, I continue with that stacker red. I repeat the process I just told you, starting with the edges and then glazing over the bigger parts, all while avoiding recesses and parts that are in the shadow areas. In between I mix corn red and wet stacker red to get some good and smooth gradients. The loincloth gets a base coat with wraithbone, same as the lambs on the head of the little fella. Wraithbone usually does not cover in one go, so I have 2 to 3 thin coats of wraithbone. The gun, pants and leather all get a good slap-in with Nuln Oil. Before I continue anywhere else, I'll finish the skin, cause in the end everything evolves around the skin. The first highlight, whereas highlight is a bit of a stretch, is Nurgling Green. I paint almost everything but the recesses and a small segment next to the shadows with the green. Then I highlight the edge with a 50-50 mix of Vallejo Ice Yellow and Nurgling Green. In between I paint the nails and teeth as well as a second coat of the loincloth with wraith bone. The leather parts get some texture with Rhinox hide. For some edges and scratches I paint the leather with Steel Legion Rep and Shabti bone. I'm trying to emulate a worn look even though on such small part is quite difficult. Some scratches will probably do. For eyes and lenses I use Vatstaka Red. So now onto some shading with Agrax Earthshade. I put some of that shade on the metal of the revolver, teeth and nails. The small string around the little helper gets some wraithbone. As soon as the shade has dried, I use Shabti bone and then a mix of Shabti bone and white to highlight the parts. The pants get some highlights with grey sear and white. Now onto the smoke of the grenade. I start with the wet blending some black on top of the smoke into some grey sear in the middle. I then use more gracia and blend some white in the lower parts. At this point it's a little sketchy, so I let it dry. I can always come back later, but rushing it now is not the way. For now I continue the loincloth. It gets some highlights with Ushabti bone. With a mix of Steel Legion drab and Rhinox hide I add texture to the boots, and with more Steel Legion in the mix I highlight the boots. The gun gets some highlights with Vallejo silver. Now onto the second try of the smoke. I just repeat my first step, but with more care and finesse. I just push the colors back and forth until it's a smooth gradient and the colors are where they are supposed to be. The bullets get a coat of wet stacker red, and the casing of the bullets gets some lead belcher. The red is not drawing too much attention away and still looks good in the overall scheme. The white parts now get kind of a dry brush. I dip my brush in white, damp it in a paper towel, and then go slightly over the texture to highlight the parts that would catch the light. I have to be honest, the contrast white did a solid job. For proper white or off-white, I'd still go up from a grey with the bluish tongue, but to get a neutral looking white on a textured surface, a pot of curry white is more than suited. If you want to know how to paint proper off-white, you need to check out the other video. Nika is showing her amazing skills there on the elf. Now let's finish the remaining parts of the miniature. Every shiny Christmas ball and star gets a coat of different contrast. For red I use Blood Angel's red, and the green balls get orc flesh. And to get a gold effect I use Iandan yellow. The lights on the little helper get some contrast too. The gun handle gets some Rhinox hide and then some highlights with Ushabti bone. The last touch is the red and white stripes on the Red Gobbo. Et voila! The little mean guy who throws a grenade. To find out where this little guy is gonna end up, be sure to check out Chicken's Tabletop Crafting, who did an amazing job combining multiple miniatures in a diorama. As always, thank you for watching, have a happy holidays and a festive season, and I will drink my tea. Goodbye.